often doing what you want, doing your own thing, enjoying your rights, and so on. That captures the very important part about what freedom is about. But it doesn't mean just doing anything you want. If I wanted to just hit someone in the audience, take someone's money, that's doing what I want, but it's not compatible with freedom, with a free society. Something else is needed. It's not an absence of law, it's law that is needed. We're accustomed to hearing, and it's understandable, again it captures something important. People say there are too darn many laws. And I understand exactly what they mean by that. Just read the Federal Register. 80,000 pages every year of new edicts, commands, controls that govern your life. This is staggering. But in a certain sense, those are not laws. Those are edicts and commands. Law is something else. John Locke put it very nicely. He said in the second treatise, and this is in response to Sir Robert Filmer, by the way. I'll give you a little bit of intellectual background. Locke writes his first and second treatise partly to attack the ideas of Sir Robert Filmer, who advocates the divine right of kings and royal absolutism, the idea that the king is above the law, and that is necessary for having an orderly society. Locke says rubbish, and is very intelligent critique. He says the end of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. For all the states have created beings capable of laws. Where there is no law, there is no freedom. For liberty is to be free from restraint and violence from others, which cannot be where there is no law. But freedom is not, as we are told, and here he's referring to Sir Robert Filmer, he quotes it, a liberty for every man to do what he lists. I'll explain the archaic English here. To list, in nautical terms, is to lean some way. We would say in modern English, as you are inclined, whatever you want. A liberty for every man to do what he lists. Locke says that's not liberty. For who could be free when every other man's humor might domineer over him? Everyone else can do the same. But it is a liberty to dispose in order, as he lists, his persons, actions, and possessions, and his whole property within the allowance of those laws under which he is, and therein not to be subject to the arbitrary will of another, but freely follow his own. And here I'll mention something relevant to the Wabash College. If you go into the Goodrich Room, and on the left, you see some names from ancient Sumerian. One of them is Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories, is a very powerful story about freedom. That's why it's the first on his list. That story around the room is actually the history of liberty as Mr. Goodrich understood it. Right? His intellectual, institutional history will go on around. Gilgamesh is a great king, powerful, magnificent, glorious. When he's depicted in these bas-reliefs, he's always holding two giant cats. These are not tabby cats. These are lions, one in each hand. He's a magnificent, powerful man. But of course, what does he do? He would not leave the young girls alone. Not unusual among holders of absolute power. And he insists on the right to sleep with the young brides on their wedding nights before they will be with their husbands. We know he doesn't really sleep with them, does he? He rapes them. He does that because he's the king. This is what kings like to do. There's no accident that recent studies, genetic studies, have shown an enormous percentage of the Eurasian population is descended from one man who lived at the same time as Genghis Khan. Who could that man have been? The question answers itself, particularly as we have his own personal testimony about one of the great benefits of conquering the city. Enkidu comes from the country to challenge him. They pray to the gods create this natural man to come and fight. And he fights with Gilgamesh. It's the story of checks and balances that James Madison tells much later. To be subject to the arbitrary power of one person or body of men is absolute tyranny. The only way to fight it is to have some other power that can check it. In this case, it's this natural management Kidu. Now we have the judiciary, the legislature, the executive, and the role of civil society, media, open discourse, Twitter, etc. So that liberty is not to be subject to the arbitrary power of other people. But similarly, those who claim the power to arbitrarily reassign, eradicate, or even create new rights violate our liberty if they have the power to readjust the rights in society. I'll mention one little digression into history of jurisprudence and juridical thinking. There's a distinction between objective rights and subjective rights. You may have noticed English has this, and many other languages, a quirky feature. We say, that's the right thing to do, or yes, that's right. But we also say, that's your right to do it, or I have a right to be paid for my services. This seems kind of odd. Why is the word right there twice? Well, the reason is objective right referring to justice, the right ordering of the world. Objective condition of the world. And here, again, the important figure is St. Thomas Aquinas in his treatise on law. Wants to unify these two. This is the philosophical idea of justice. Aristotle's ideas of distributive justice, for example. The subjective idea of right is the contribution of lawyers. Lawyers are not as interested in what is the right. They're interested in a dispute about cows eating daisies. That's what lawyers do, right? They're interested in who had the right in this case, or a dispute over payment in a contract. And what St. Thomas does is he quotes Aristotle, and he quotes Ulpian from the Digest of Justinian, the great quote of the Roman law, and he accomplishes something incredibly important. He says, well, look, no one of us, and here I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting from St. Thomas, you can go check it yourself. No one of us knows what would be necessary to know the objectively right ordering of the world. God could know, but not me, Thomas. I can't know that. What I can know is what your rights are and my rights are. If it's my daisies or your cow, whether we signed a contract, and so on. What happens is the way that we achieve objective rights is by respecting subjective rights. It's a justice-generating machine, if you will. The way we get justice in a just society is by respecting rights. But contemporary, we call them socialist or even social democratic theorists of the welfare state, and John Rawls is among them, argue, no, we have to have, they invent a new category called social justice, which suggests to me it's not justice. You have to modify it. It's social justice. In order to realize social justice, we must override the normal subjective rights. Your right to run your business, keep your property, run your life, and so on, in order to achieve this social justice. And they shatter the connection between these two that was accomplished in the classical theory of rights, for which Thomas bears much of the responsibility. If you're interested in these questions, I have a number of essays on these issues, laying out the intellectual history and my substantive views on the errors of the welfare rights mentality. It's not that people advocated are stupid by any means. They're very intelligent and well-meaning people. But I think in the process, a casualty is having a society founded on respect for rights. And it moves us back towards absolutism. The idea that the sovereign will now tell us what we may or may not do. The second theme that struck me as an outcome of the book, I'll run through this fairly quickly, is the relationship between abstract formulations of rights